going to show you how to paint an eye in acrylic paints. I'm working on paper, so I have done a simple outline drawing in pencil, not really too much detail as it's all going to get covered up with the paint, so it's there as a basic guideline only. I'm adding some skin tones here, just getting the lights and darks in the right places, not really too much detail, not really blending the paint that much, just trying to get the correct tones and some colours before I work on the actual eye. As you can see here, when I first put the colours down, they're quite bright, quite harsh. These will be toned down later on in the painting process. I'm adding some shadows into the whites of the eyes, some blues, and going back to the skin tones just to get a bit more tone in and a slightly more detail. I'm then going to start on the iris of the eye. So this is a hazel and green eye. There's a lot of different colours in this. So I'm just putting some colours in, but they're quite harsh as you can see at the moment. They're not really blended. I'm working here with a technique of building up the eye in layers. So one layer is drying and then I'm putting layers of other paint over the top. If I use the paint very thickly, it will cover up the layer completely underneath, but if I'm using it with a slightly dry brush or quite a wet watery paint, a bit like watercolour, I can blend over the top and you can see the colours underneath showing through slightly. So I'm gradually adding the highlights and the details to the eye, working with a dry brush at times to blend over the top, adding details with a finer brush, and all the time trying to blend the colours together more so that it looks more realistic. So you can see that I repeat this process again and again, gradually adding different colours and blending over the top until I'm happy with it. Adding in more on the highlights on the right hand side of the eye, adding the details of the reflections with quite a fine brush and the little flecks in the eye with a fine brush. So I'm adding some quite watery white paint here to allow the bottom layers to really show through, using it more like watercolour, and then back to thicker paint for the highlights. You can see at times I'm actually using my fingers to blend the paint when it's still wet as well, just to give it a bit more smoothness to it rather than such a harsh stroke with a brush. Once I'm happy with the actual iris of the eye, I'm going back to work on the whites of the eyes, get the details in, adjust the skin tones. And I'm lightening up the skin tones here. I want to get all the skin tones correct before I do the finishing touches, which for this painting will be the eyelashes. As you can see, I've left those to the very end because I want to be able to paint over the background. I'm adding some more detail to the eyelids. If I had more time, I would actually continue working onto the skin tones and get more detail. So I've got the same level of detail as I do in the iris of the eye. And finally, I'm adding the eyelashes with a fine brush and quite a liquid black paint. And here we have the finished eye in acrylic.